Hello everybody, I'm Jess Graves. I work at Hampton VA Medical Center, and today we're going to talk about Beneficiary Travel. I know you can't wait, so I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop and we're going to go ahead and get going. Alright, so Beneficiary Travel and Special Mode Transportation. Beneficiary Travel is also known as Beneficiary Travel. So we're going to talk about what makes people eligible for Beneficiary Travel and reimbursement, and also talk about how that happens and some different kinds of scenarios with regards to travel. The deal is that the VA has the ability to provide some benefits for people with regard to travel. They have to be eligible for travel, and those benefits can be either reimbursement for the miles that they've traveled, or they can be the actual provision of transportation, whether it be by common carrier or special mode transportation, which is a specially tricked out type of vehicle that we'll go over in a second. What we ought to know is that all travel requests must be reviewed and approved by the Beneficiary Travel Office, which we lovingly refer to as the BTO, or designated service, but at Hampton, it's the BTO. Okay? In some circumstances, a clinician has to be involved, and we'll review that as well. So this little chart goes over different administrative eligibility for Beneficiary Travel. As you can see, not all eligibility is created equal. Just like when we were looking at the eligibility and enrollment lesson, people's benefits are different, and that includes Beneficiary Travel. There are some people who only get their travel benefits for service-connected conditions, and there are some people who get their travel benefits for everything. So this slide is, just like everything else, included in your MSA handbook, so feel free to refer to it whenever you need to. Moving on to special mode transportation. What is it? Well, special mode transportation includes vehicles like an ambulance, an ambulette, which is, I had to Google because I wasn't sure, but it's a specially equipped vehicle made to accommodate people who need specific equipment. An air ambulance, wheelchair van, basically anything which is specially tricked out to accommodate anybody with special travel needs. What is not included in special mode transportation? Well, public transportation, your taxi, your Metro Pass, anything like that. Any privately owned conveyance, so if people have their own tricked out vehicle for their special needs equipment, or they have special adaptive equipment in their own vehicle that is privately owned, then that's not paid for by the VA. Now, as far as eligibility for special mode transportation, there are two parts of it. So the first part is the administrative eligibility, which is this right here, the part that involves the veteran's own specific situation and says whether or not they're covered for just service-connected or everything. The second part is the actual medical justification for special mode transportation. So, for example, the patient is wheelchair or stretcher bound. We have a spinal cord unit here. There are some people who roll around on their stomachs on stretchers. They are laying down prone all the time. So clearly they might need a special sort of transportation for that. In their chart, there has to be the clinical determination that special mode transportation is required to transport them. So not just desired, but it's a requirement for that veteran. All special mode transportation must be pre-authorized by the BTO. A patient, unfortunately, can't just decide that one day they want to travel in an ambulance, so they're going to call up their local EMS and get an ambulance ride to the VA and then have the VA pay for it. That's not how that works. Of course, if there's an emergency and they end up in an ambulance, that's a different story. But a patient cannot simply decide that they want to use special conveyance and then after the fact put in for special mode transportation. Unless it's an emergency, all special transportation or special mode transportation has to be pre-authorized by the Beneficiary Travel office. Couple of resources for you. The first that I will point out is right here. I have a list of Hampton VA Medical Center Beneficiary Travel office staff. We have none other than our wonderful supervisor, Miss Larissa Phillips, and her team are listed right here on this slide and have encouraged me to tell you that you can reach out to them anytime. At Hampton, we live on instant messaging, so it is Skype right now. Later, it might be Microsoft Teams, but keep your instant messenger up and feel free to use it if you have questions for Beneficiary Travel. If they're not immediately available, you can send the patient to go talk to Beneficiary Travel. The point is, do not be afraid to reach out to them. And this PowerPoint is mostly for your own information so that you know how it works. But if you have specific questions for a veteran, that's what that team is there for, okay? There is a federal benefits for veteran dependents and survivors booklet. The link for that is included in this PowerPoint. It is probably more information than you really need to know, but I don't like to hold resources from people, so feel free to peruse it if you'd like to. And of course, again, any questions, feel free to reach out to the Beneficiary Travel office. There are some very rare cases where we have to withhold travel benefits from people. They can be withheld if and only if there's been a clinical determination that a travel allowance would be counterproductive to therapy and it has been recorded in their chart. I shouldn't say only if. There are probably other circumstances in which somebody can have benefits withheld. So if they've been caught being fraudulent, there's probably some sort of situation where we can decide to withhold benefits. But these circumstances are pretty rare, but just so you know, it is possible that we can withhold travel benefits in some circumstances. Now, if there has been a clinical determination that giving this person reimbursement would be counterproductive to their therapy, then it has to be documented in the chart, not only by the clinician, but the chief of the service or designee would have to also document their approval of that decision in the record. Okay, so, okay, here's the other thing. We can't withhold travel benefits just because we accidentally paid somebody too much before unless they agree to it. So if we mess up and we reimburse somebody too much, we can't just decide with no discussion with the veteran that we're going to keep the next payment to make up for it. So it's on us, basically, unless we can get the veteran to agree to let us withhold the next payment. When it comes to mileage reimbursement, something that is useful to know is that no one at the Hampton VA Medical Center level makes this decision. It's not the director, it's not leadership, it's not the VISN. This is public law. And the rate is almost 42 cents per mile payable to eligible veterans. So you'll hear every once in a while that people are unhappy with the mileage rate, that it's not helpful, especially when we get to the next slide, which can sometimes add insult to injury, which is about deductibles. So not only are you going to give me this little pittance, but you're going to withhold deductibles from it. I totally get it. Gas is expensive, especially if you live in places that it's really expensive to live in, like Virginia, California, anywhere on a coast, basically. However, it's not up to us. they can feel free to contact their legislator because it's public law. And basically the deal is that if we're going to be allowed to offer benefits to people, then we have to be compliant with the public law, which means we have to give them the amount that we're told to give them, and we have to assess the deductibles that we're told to assess. Okay? So what are deductibles? The deductibles are for one-way travel, $3 per trip. For round trip, it's $6. There is a maximum calendar month deductible. So basically, they can only withhold so much money per month, and then you get the full amount. The monthly cap for deductibles is $18. Now, this is an either-or situation. Okay, veterans either will reach their $18 or they will hit 6 one-way trip or 3 round trips, and then they're done with deductibles. It's whichever comes first. So either they hit that $18 or they've had 3 round trip trips or 6 one-way trips. And that applies to all VA facilities regardless of the deductible amount that's withheld per trip. So we're in Hampton, Richmond is nearby, say they come to Hampton and, a few times, and then they have a trip to Richmond. That counts as well towards their deductibles. Knowledge check! Woo! So, let's do a little test. You have a veteran who makes 3 round trip visits to the VA in April. Each trip was only $4, so the $12 was applied to the veteran's deductible. They've got another round trip visit upcoming that month in April. So which of the following is true? Either the deductibles will continue to be applied since the veteran has not met the $18, or they're not going to have any more deductibles since they made 3 round trip visits. So which is it? I'll wait. All right. So the answer is, drum roll, no further deductibles will be applicable since they already made 3 round trip trips. Remember that this is either or. They don't have to hit the $18 if they have made their 3 round trip trips or their 6 one-way trips. So this person has already met the max for what they need to do to have no more deductibles. So they're good for the rest of April. When it comes to waivers, there are certain circumstances in which we can waive the deductibles for Benny Travel. If it's a C&P exam, so compensation and pension, usually the reason for going to compensation and pension is to be examined to determine what is service-connected and what isn't. So you might remember that a lot of Benny Travel is, for some people, only for service-connected conditions. Well, if we don't know what's service-connected and what isn't yet, that's going to be hard to figure out, right? So usually the C&P examinations are deductible free. There are cases in which there are non-veterans who come and they're the patient's ride, and they're a caregiver, they're an attendant, or they're an organ donor. If you're giving our veteran a kidney, I'm not charging you a deductible. That's the least I can do, right? So if somebody's giving a piece of their human person out, if you're giving me a chunk of your meat, then no, we're not doing deductibles here. If there are veterans who are requiring and approved for special mode transportation, we're already paying for the special mode transportation, right? So we're not giving you reimbursement, so there's not going to be a deductible. If it's determined that the imposition of a deductible is going to cause a severe financial hardship. So basically, if you can't afford it to lose that deductible, then we're not going to assess it. Other than that, it is public law that everybody who's getting Benny Travel has to have deductibles applied. Again, if we're going to offer the benefit, then we have to be compliant with what the law tells us to do. Okay, so referring back to this last bullet point here, the severe financial hardship, what is that? Again, we refer to public law. That's not something that is arbitrarily determined by the VA Medical Center or anyone here. Public law says that the following are severe financial hardship, okay? Either if the veteran is getting a VA pension, which, as I understand it, is not a whole lot of money. So if you're getting a VA pension, we pretty much can safely assume that you really can't afford to lose that deductible. If a veteran's income for the year prior or projected for the forthcoming year doesn't exceed the appropriate VA pension level. So basically, if you're making less than a VA pension, we're extra not keeping that deductible. The means test has a lot to do with it. So in eligibility and enrollment, that lesson, when we talked about the means test, there are set incomes that are established by law that are, if you make more than this amount of money, then you're not eligible for VA benefits, right? So if you're below those certain amounts of money, then deductibles will not be assessed for you because it is understood that you're incurring severe financial hardship, okay? Now, somebody can be ineligible for deductible waivers at one point, and then life changes, right? So they might come into a situation to where now they would be eligible. So my recommendation is that you don't hesitate to send somebody over to the BTO to check if their situation has changed, or if they make some sort of comment about, I don't think I can afford this. Well, why don't you go talk to somebody in benefits and see what they can do for you? Because depending on what's happening in your life, you may be eligible for some help. I've personally had patients who have told me, I'm not going to make it to my next visit because I can't afford it. And then I've had them go and talk to the Beneficiary Travel office, and they found out that they were eligible for these waivers for their deductibles for Beneficiary Travel. So this is one of those situations where I say that we have a decision to make on whether or not we're going to be a gatekeeper or a facilitator to world-class healthcare. And all we have to do is direct them to the Beneficiary Travel office. So don't hesitate to do that if you think it might be helpful to somebody, because I would hate to see somebody not get their care because of something like this, especially if we could help. So is there anything that we can do to help obtain travel for ineligible beneficiaries? This is a situation where I say we may or may not agree with the rules, right? So we may look at the eligibility standards or criteria and say, wow, you really have to be broke as a joke to be eligible for this. Like, that is not cool. But we don't make those rules. And that's the point where I say that our job at this point is to simply know what the rules are and be compliant with them. We don't necessarily have to agree with them, but we do have to be compliant with them. And if we really feel strongly about what the rules are, then we can always provide feedback to our leadership, or we could get promoted up into leadership, and maybe one day we'll have the ability to have an impact on those decisions. But for now, we really need to just be cognizant of what the rules are. So when it comes to ineligible beneficiaries, unfortunately, there are some people who are not eligible for Beneficiary Travel. So what can we do for them? We can't promise them travel, of course, but what we can do is we can make suggestions. Do you have somebody, a family member, a friend who can give you a ride? We can refer them to social workers. Our social workers here are really good at finding resources, free or super cheap resources for people. In your particular area, wherever you live, there may be free resources. Here in Hampton, we have the Veterans Transportation System, the DAV van, which you can see on that slide, or community or county transportation services. Some people may have like a church that'll give people a ride, okay? One of the things that I will say about these resources is I always make it a point to mention to veterans that these are resources that we have contact with, but they do not work for us. So what we do is we give the veteran the information. At Hampton, we have all kinds of flyers for Need a Ride. It's got the numbers for DAV and then and the other resources. And then the veteran would reach out to those people and make their own arrangements. We can't control when they're offered, so if the DAV van only runs between this and this hour, then that's up to them. They're volunteers. They don't work for us. We can't force them to do anything. And I just like to be clear about that with veterans. That way, if they have any issues with those services, that they know that we don't control them, okay? So as good organizational stewards and as people who care about our veterans, it's our mission, literally our mission to care, right? We should be proactive in assisting veterans in exploring these options, okay? So if they're not eligible for travel, they're not eligible. There's only so much that we can do, but if we are aware that there are resources, we should bridge that gap and give the veteran the resources to look into. So some what ifs here. What if a veteran decides to go to their preferred facility instead of the closest VA facility that can provide the required care? So the rule for Beneficiary Travel usually is that the veteran gets reimbursed for travel to the closest VA facility to their residence that can provide the care. Okay, so number one, that's one of the reasons why it's really important to have a good permanent address on file, because if we don't know where you live, we can't provide travel, right? And we can't reimburse you because we don't know from where to where. The second thing is, if a veteran lives here and decides, you know what, I really like the Orlando VA. I think I'm gonna make a trip to Orlando and have my toenails clipped, right? We're still gonna reimburse them if they're eligible for Beneficiary Travel from here to Hampton. So the rest of the trip to Orlando would be up to the veteran. I don't know that that's happened, but that's what that's for. So if a veteran decides that they want a different VA, they can choose to go there if that's what they want to do, but we're only going to reimburse them for travel to the nearest facility that offers the service from their home. And that is inclusive not only of mileage, but for special mode. So how do we determine distance? Every once in a while, we'll get people who will say, you know what? You guys' system is messed up. I don't agree that this is how far it is. I think it's a lot farther. And to address that, here's how this works. Every VA uses the same system. It's called the BT dashboard or Beneficiary Travel dashboard, and it is a standard tool for mileage calculation. Again, every VA uses it. So if you call the VA over in Augusta and ask them how far it is from my residence to the Hampton VA, they're using the same tool as the people in Hampton would use. So there will not be any disparity in the mileage that you're given. That dashboard uses Bing Maps, and it is something that is required for use. So it's not up to us, it's not a guess, it's not like one person uses Waze and another person uses Google Maps, it's all the same thing. So what if the veteran has a P.O. box as their primary address or is residing elsewhere? The deal is that Beneficiary Travel, again, is intended to assist people with transportation from where they live or where they're staying to a VA facility that can provide their care. Clearly, the veterans do not live in a P.O. box unless they're from that Men in Black movie and they're those little aliens, you know, that maybe live in the subway locker, but I highly doubt that. Most people live in some sort of building, right? And we need to know where that building is so that we can provide you with benefits. Okay? So if a veteran can't tell us where they live, if they can't give us an actual address for where they're staying, then unfortunately we just can't provide travel benefits. You got to meet us halfway. You have to be able to tell us where you live for us to be able to calculate distance to be able to reimburse you. Okay? So do we pay for lodging and meals associated with VA travel? Sometimes. Sometimes we do. We can provide reimbursement for up to 50% of government employee rates for meals and lodging when appropriate. Yes, that's a long sentence. Yes, if you're familiar with government rates, you may think, yeah, that's not very much, but, you know, it's kind of better than nothing, I guess. And that's all determined by the Beneficiary Travel office and authorized in advance. So again, a patient is not able to just decide that they're going to go to a VA and make a weekend of it and stay at a hotel and then give us the receipts afterwards and ask us to pay for it. It has to be authorized in advance. Okay? We have veterans every once in a while who are sent from here to Cleveland for kidney transplants. One of the things that I always ask them is, have you talked to the Beneficiary Travel office yet about making your arrangements? There have been a couple people I have encountered who have not arranged that in advance and just assumed it would be covered and then had some major problems. So do your veterans a favor if they happen to mention that they're traveling somewhere for a VA procedure or something like that, and make sure that they have touched base with the Beneficiary Travel office to find out how to make sure they get reimbursed for all that stuff. And always, always tell them to save their receipts. Do we have the authority to pay for ferries, bridges, roads, tunnel tolls, luggage, parking, etc., etc.? Yeah, we do in a lot of situations. We need to tell veterans prior to travel to save all of their receipts. When it comes to travel, save every receipt that you can. Put them in a baggie and bring them all when you're done. Okay? If there are any luggage restrictions, we need to know about that. So put everything in a baggie and bring it when you're done. For a lot of these things, the veterans will not get reimbursed if they don't have a receipt. So they need to keep a record of every cost that they incur when it comes to all of these extra things. Reimbursement for all of these situations and items is a case-by-case basis. Again, that's going to be made by the BTO. So if we have any questions about these things, where do we send them? To our Beneficiary Travel superheroes. So how long do people have to submit a claim? Well, for mileage reimbursement, veterans have 30 days to submit a claim after completion of travel. That's why if they go to the kiosk here and they select that they want to put in for Beneficiary Travel, they have two options. They can either select, I'm putting in for travel that I have done today, or I'm putting in for travel that I've done in the last 30 days. So it's pretty clear that beyond that, they're not going to be reimbursed. Now, what happens if veterans have just found out that they're eligible for Beneficiary Travel? Well, if they've just found out, then what happens is here the veteran will get a letter that says, congratulations, you're eligible for Beneficiary Travel. Whatever the date on that letter is, they have 30 calendar days from that day, the award letter date, to submit receipts for travel or to submit claims for past visits. So I've talked to veterans who have said, oh, now I've got to get all this information and paperwork on all my past visits, or I have to print out all of my past appointments because I only have 30 days to get reimbursed for all this stuff. So if a veteran comes up to you and asks you for a list of all of their past appointments and stuff like that, please be helpful and give it to them and understand they may have just found out that they're eligible for Benny Travel. So we're going to try to help them out and get that reimbursement. When it comes to special mode, again, special mode transportation, so specialized vehicles, has to be arranged and approved in advance unless it's an emergency. What about people who work here? Can they get Benny Travel reimbursement if they have a medical appointment? Yes, they can, even if it's on the same day that they're working. Okay? Now, if it's an unscheduled visit, like it's not a scheduled appointment, but they have to go somewhere here for an appointment and they're seen as a veteran, then they can be reimbursed for one-way travel, which from earlier in the PowerPoint, you may have asked yourself, how might somebody have 6 one-way trips? Like, did they ever go home? Sometimes that's the way it happens, is people get reimbursed for one-way travel for certain circumstances. What about volunteers? Yes. If a volunteer is eligible for Benny Travel, then yes, they can be reimbursed, even if it's on the same day that they receive care that they volunteered. What about people who travel together? What about everybody that's going to pile up in a Ford Fiesta and make a group trip of it? We probably won't see as much of that here in COVID times. But from time to time, you'll see people, especially here at Hampton. I don't know about other places, but this is Club VA. Like, people come here to hang out sometimes. And so every once in a while, you'll see a car full of folks just open up and people just start pouring out, and they're all here for an appointment. When it comes to situations like that, those people are not all eligible for Benny Travel. It's the person owning the vehicle. So everybody else didn't actually incur a cost. It's the owner of the vehicle that actually had to put gas in their car, right? So that's the answer to that. What about people who take the DAV system, or they take HRT, or they do park and ride? Now, other places might not have this, but here in Hampton Roads, we do have park and rides, where there's like a big parking lot where people can drive to this parking lot and park, and then a bus will take them to a destination. So if a veteran is meeting the DAV van or HRT, the Handy Ride, or somebody at the local Food Lion, and they get that transportation the rest of the way, then they can be reimbursed for travel to the local Food Lion. So wherever they are traveling to in their own private conveyance, they get reimbursement for. Now, the part where the van takes them the rest of the way, they aren't reimbursed for. But they can get reimbursed for wherever they're meeting that transportation at. What about ride sharing? This may seem a little frivolous, but there are situations where people will tell us, HRT doesn't come to my house, or people have a really difficult time getting up to the bus stop because of their physical situation, and they can't get anybody to actually come to their house to pick them up. So in situations like that, we're still able to help in a lot of cases. If a person has to get an Uber or Lyft or whatever ride-sharing application to bring them to the VA, in a lot of cases we can help them and get them reimbursed for that. Now, this is a really new thing. I don't know if they have all the rules hammered out about that yet. So essentially what I will tell you for that is that they need to go to the Benny Travel office for the specifics on that. We don't have criteria yet on what makes people eligible for that. So if anybody has a question about Uber or any kind of ride sharing, just send them on to Benny Travel and they can get information on that. So basically, The important part to remember is to make sure that you are familiar with your BTO, your Benny Travel office. You know how to direct patients there. You know how to get in touch with that office yourself, and you feel comfortable reaching out or sending veterans there for assistance with their travel needs. Any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us. Willing to take questions, eager to take questions at any time. Thank you, and I'll see you around.